Hello, everybody, and welcome back to our podcast. My name is Chris,
And my name is James.
and we are the Formula One Bros.
Just two twins with a love of F1 to share our thoughts on everything in the world of Formula One.
All right. Well, we are finally, after 2 long years, back at Australia. And I tell you what, the race as a whole, or the weekend as a whole, was awesome. It was so nice for Formula One to be back in Australia.
Yeah, it really was. Oh my gosh, it was just great. It was nice. I didn't realize how much I missed seeing that track and being just for Formula One being in that country. I didn't realize how much I missed it. I didn't. Australia's got some of the best F1 fans. One of the most iconic tracks. It was great to be back.
Yeah, for sure. And I know for the two of us growing up watching Formula One, I mean, that's been the opening race since we can remember. And so there's also, I think, for fans like us that have been watching the sport for a long time and don't remember any other opening race, you know, there's a huge sense of nostalgia attached to that track, you know. And so it was just really cool to be back, and the race definitely, I think, lived up to the hype, for sure. And that's mainly due to the track updates. They look fantastic.
I was just about to say that the track updates that they made made the racing a lot better.
Mm-hmm.
That, and coupled with the fact that, the car updates have been helping with the racing too.
Mm-hmm.
So all in all, it was just like, because in the past, like the race in Australia, other than 2010, which was like a banger because, with the rain and everything, it proved to be a great race. But like some of the other races had kind of been a little bit boring. But this one was very entertaining. It was awesome racing all the way throughout. The track, and that was all thanks to the track updates.
Yeah, I think the last time that we actually had a proper race at Australia in 2019, I think there were 10 on track overtakes the entire race, and that race with the modern F1 cars is a little bit known for being sort of a processional. I don't know the actual stats for the amount of overtakes that happened on the track, but it was the track was faster. It looked way easier to overtake. Still not like, I mean, that track is always going to be tough to overtake, but the updates definitely helped. And the regulations are seemingly continuously, proving that even at a track like this, it's still easy to at least follow. I will say though, because of that though, I think at tracks like this, and I think maybe like we're going to experience that coming up at Imola, places like Monaco, things like that. There's a little bit, because they can follow so much, teams are starting to have a little bit of overheating problem, I've noticed. And so I think that might be something that teams either didn't account for with the new, like with being able to follow, or did so minimally. So I think that'll be something. I think this track and this race in particular exacerbated that issue. But it'll be interesting to see how that evolves nonetheless.
Yeah, I mean, because it doesn't feel like it, but it really is a street track. It really is a street track. Albert Park, I mean, they're racing through, it's not a permanent racetrack. They're racing through a public park in Melbourne. So, I mean, it doesn't feel like it, but it really is a street track.
Yeah.
Nowhere near close like what we have at, Monaco or something. But, the updates that they made it very quick, and it was, there were quite a few overheating issues. But it was cool that at least the cars were able to follow a little bit closer than they have in the past.
Yeah. And I know too, especially the second sector, because they got rid of that 9-10 chicane there. And so the entire like backside of that stretch of track that goes on the backside of the lake is just one sweeping straight. So it got, especially that sector, garnered a lot of comparison to Jeddah, like the middle sector of Jeddah from 2 weeks ago. Even though we actually had some pretty different performances for teams last race to this race. So let's just go ahead and dive right into the race. The race started with Charles Leclerc and Max Verstappen on the front row once again. I
feel like that's going to be a common theme this year.
Yeah. And it featured some drivers out of position, especially the two Spaniards in the field, with Sainz starting in 9th and Alonso starting 10th. Obviously, we know the Ferrari is quicker than 9th, but Sainz this whole weekend has just met with some bad luck, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But yeah, and Alonso too, I think had a lot more in it in his car. I mean, he was purple first sector on his final lap, but he never got to complete it because of the red flag in Q3. So yeah, it was all in all just a very mixed bag. A lot of people out of position. Lando Norris putting in a cracker of a lap in qualifying to start P4. And we also had a lot of teams that traditionally had been Q3 threats that didn't start anywhere near. So like, Haas, especially Haas, we saw their pace just disappear, along with Alfa Romeo too. I do know that there are some people that were asking Günther Steiner about the lack of pace that Haas had, and he said that it was mainly due to setup. It was or something track specific that they kind of didn't account for, that it took a while to get dialed in. So we had a lot of people starting out of position from what we had seen over the past 2 weeks. So that was that. And then from the start, we had a really good, Leclerc and Verstappen got a really good getaway. And it was really the two of them taking off on the first lap. Mercedes had a really great start. Hamilton got up to P3. Russell got by both McLarens and was in P5. So it was a really good start.
Yeah, it was very, very entertaining. It was a very good start. And, I've got my Leclerc shirt on. It was very cool to see Charles, and throughout he was able, he led every single lap. And so that was, you got his first Grand Slam, and that was so cool to see. So cool to see.
And very early on, Charles Leclerc demonstrated that he was very much in control of that race. And then so the first thing that happened during that race was the incident with Sainz. He got a really, really poor start, just sank like a stone through the field. At one point was being overtaken by Mick Schumacher, fighting for 14th position, which is nowhere near where Ferrari should be. Him, Alonso, and both Aston Martins started on the hard tires, and I think it was just he had problems getting them to where they needed to be. Had a slow formation lap, didn't have the tires heated and gripped up to where they needed to be, sank through the field, and then just missed a braking point going into turn 9 and slid through the grass. And then he didn't hit anything. He beached it into the gravel, but he beached it into the gravel and couldn't get out. They had to bring a crane on to get his car out, and that brought out eventually the safety car by way of a virtual safety car. And that was Sainz's weekend over. Qualified 9th, had a horrible start, and his Grand Prix lasted a lap and a half.
Yeah, that was tough to see. Especially considering he's in the throes of contract renewal negotiations. So, and I'll mention that later. I don't want to talk too much about that because that's in one of our later segments talking about Carlos. But yeah, it was a big bummer to see, especially for considering how good he had been in the past 3 weeks.
Yeah,
3 races.
I think we've started to see this trend with Carlos, especially since he started at McLaren in 2019, is he he just, for some reason, catches the bad luck bug at the very beginning of every season, just has trouble getting started, getting grips to everything. But then later on in the season, he just comes on and just this form comes out of nowhere. So Carlos is nothing to be worried about. It was just a lot of bad luck, and he was put out of position. He was starting on a tire that was not the optimal starting tire. So I think a lot of that bad luck at the very beginning of the season is due to the number of times that he's changed teams, because he hasn't lasted more than 2 years at a team. So if this contract gets renewed, this will be the first time where he lasts more than 2 full seasons at a team. So I think that'll be really, really good for him. But I feel so bad for Carlos. Just a lot of bad luck. Moving on. As we said before, both Mercedes got a really good start, with Hamilton improving to P3, getting by Norris and Perez, and Russell getting ahead of both of the McLarens of Daniel Ricciardo and Lando Norris.
It was a great start for Mercedes.
Yeah, it was great. And honestly, I was pleasantly surprised to see them up there fighting in podium contention places again. It was good to see. Racing resumed on lap 7, lap 12. Verstappen, the thing that blew my mind is on lap 12, Verstappen was already complaining of graining on his front left tire, which at Australia, graining on the front left is always going to be a problem. If you don't know what graining is, so what happens is as the tire slips and slides on usually more abrasive circuits, the surface of the tire actually begins to rip apart.
Mm-hmm.
And you start getting these grooves or divots that make it not a smooth contact patch anymore. And so it's a problem that continuously cycles on itself. So it rips apart the tire. There isn't a smooth contact patch. So the tire slides even more, which exacerbates the problem. And so already on lap 12, and I think that just is highlighting a problem right now, that Red Bull are having tire wear problems more so than Ferrari and Mercedes.
Mm-hmm.
So, which I think, again, this track was resurfaced recently, so that could have played into a factor, but that was really surprising to me. And then on lap 19, Verstappen was the first of the leaders to pit. He ditched the mediums, put on the hard tires. And then a lap later, Hamilton was pursuing the Red Bull of Sergio Perez. And it was looking like, and Perez was also, having a hard time hanging on to his tires. So from the get-go, it was looking like Mercedes and Ferrari were just having a better time holding onto their tires. Lap 22, pit cycles were continuing. This time it was Leclerc. He retained the lead because Hamilton, who had worked his way up to P2 by virtue of not pitting, also pitted, and actually came out ahead of Perez. So Hamilton got the overcut on Perez, but Perez eventually got him back on the outlap. And then on lap 23, the safety car came out for Sebastian Vettel, crashing. And again, another person, and we'll talk about Sebastian Vettel a little bit later too, but another person that just had some of the worst luck I'd ever seen in a race weekend.
Yeah, that was also very heartbreaking to see, considering he's so loved.
Yeah, and he is someone that I think out of everybody could have benefited the most from running the whole race, because of how on the back foot he is, because of missing the first 2 races of the season because of COVID. So he's someone that I would have liked to have seen finish that race, and unfortunately it didn't go his way. But by virtue of that safety car, Russell took advantage and overtook Hamilton, Perez, and Alonso, who had not pitted, who was yet to pit. So it put Russell up into P2. And then racing resumed on lap 27. And everything was kind of there. People were coming, going. Perez eventually worked his way up. Lap 36 was when Perez worked his way up past Hamilton and Alonso and Russell, And so it was Leclerc P1, Verstappen P2, Perez P3. And then on lap 39, Verstappen stopped with another power unit problem and a virtual safety car deployed, which makes 2 retirements for Max Verstappen in 3 races at the beginning of the season. And he only has 25 points. Big yikes.
Yeah, major yikes. If Red Bull and Max want to be, and I know it's early, but these issues are something that historically have not been something easily fixed.
Yep.
So if Max and Red Bull want to make a serious title run this year, they got to figure out what's going on. And Christian Horner mentioned it's still something fuel related.
Mm-hmm.
It's not necessarily power specific, but it's fuel related.
Mm-hmm.
It's a fuel flow issue, and they just have to figure it out if they want to be serious title contenders. You got to figure it out.
If it's the same sort of problem that happened to both cars in Bahrain, then it's the power unit not working efficiently with the new E10 fuel, which burns it has a different like resting temperature in the power unit when it's running. And as the temperature fluctuates, the fuel expands and contracts. So I think they're just having issues getting the fuel from the fuel tank into the power unit. I think that is kind of the source of their problems right now. So I don't know what specifically the problem was in Australia, but like you said, both happening to the fuel. And I think that is kind of where the problem lies, is just Honda, the Red Bull powertrain badged Hondas not getting to grips with the E10 fuel or so they're going to have to do something. And that also goes to show. So the biggest thing, and I think this is why Ferrari has come out on top, is the only thing Ferrari focused on was creating an entirely new power unit centered around this new E10 fuel. And
they're not having any issues.
Exactly. And they worked closely with Shell to develop this E10 fuel. Shell is their fuel provider. They worked closely with Shell and they completely scrapped. Obviously, their old power unit was illegal. So they completely redesigned their power unit and they went into it specifically in mind to cope with this new E10 fuel. And Red Bull and Mercedes only adapted their current concepts, and I believe Renault too, only adapted their current concepts to match E10 fuels, which is why all of the other teams, with the exception of Ferrari, Aston Martin, and Haas, or not Aston Martin, Alfa Romeo and Haas, are having reliability problems with their power unit. Reliability problems for Alfa Romeo and Haas are a little bit different, but that's why you're not seeing. Specifically with the power unit, they're not having any issues, and I think that is highlighting a flaw in the concepts between all of the different power units in their development. So that'll be interesting to see. But once racing got going, everything stayed the same. The podium from lap 39 on was Leclerc, Perez, Russell. That stayed the same throughout. Racing resumed on lap 40. There are a couple weird things at the very end, like Lance Stroll getting a 5-second time penalty for weaving under braking down the straight, which that is something that we'll get to at the very end of our segment, our episode.
That made Valtteri Bottas very mad.
Yeah, well, it also made Fernando Alonso mad too, because he was sitting
Fernando
back there on fresh tires, having just pitted, like, get out of my way. I'm like light years faster than all of you. And Lance Stroll was making it very difficult for Gasly, Bottas, and Alonso to get by. The last thing, the most legendary thing that happened all race, was on the last lap Alex Albon pitted for mediums solely so he could fulfill the tire rule. So for those that don't know, in a completely dry race, you have to use 2 different tire compounds throughout the race. Alex Albon started on the hards. He went the entire race, made it up to P7 on the hard compounds, pitted on the last lap, pitted as the leaders were coming onto the last lap or finishing the race. He pitted on the last lap so that he can put on mediums and finish P10, claiming his first points with Williams and Williams' first points of the season. And
what a legend.
What a freaking legend. Alex Albon, you made hard tires, which were predicted to last 40 laps, last 57 laps. Granted, there are a couple safety cars. There are a couple safety cars in there, which certainly helped. But Alex Albon, you're a freaking legend. And there's no way that you're watching this episode, but in the event that you are,
in the event that Alex sees this.
Yeah. Anybody that knows him, want to share this.
Maybe we should add a segment meme of the week, because that would be in there.
That's definitely up there for meme of the week. So that is our race review for the Australian Grand Prix. So before we get into our next segment, I just want to do a couple of my takeaways. Like, we can just go through these takeaways and chat about each of them.
Mm-hmm.
So my first big takeaway from the weekend is Mercedes and McLaren look much stronger this weekend at a reconfigured track that looked a lot like Jeddah, which is great. But I have a feeling it's a little bit more track specific than I think a lot of people think it is. And I think we're going to need a couple more races to assess the true pace. Lando Norris has already said that McLaren is going to be race to race, and it's going to be very dependent on the track layout, the surface, the conditions, all of that stuff. I think it's going to be more race to race for McLaren, and I think we're going to need a little bit more time. Mercedes has already said that they're going to still need a few races as they get updates on the cars, but I think this is really promising for both teams.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just good to see them back up there, because seeing him, especially McLaren, where they were in Bahrain, like, oh my gosh, it was just like, how did they go from being a top team to a back marker,
to literally having the slowest car or the second slowest car in Bahrain?
That I was thinking in the Bahrain after that race, I was like, that's a bigger downfall than we saw with Williams, because at least with Williams it was gradual.
Yeah, or Ferrari.
Yeah, it was just like in one season they went from hero to zero that. But it's really, really good to see them back. Both finishing in the points, and I know Daniel, I'm sure, was very happy with how that went, considering he hasn't always had the best luck in Australia. So good for both McLaren and Mercedes.
Yeah, it was so cool. I was just about to say it's great for Daniel Ricciardo, the hometown crowd. There was a shot from the final corner as the McLarens rounded it, and the standing ovation that Daniel Ricciardo got was so cool to see. This is a weekend that he and McLaren needed. And I'm glad that they were able to do that.
Absolutely.
The next is Alpine looks properly strong. Their form looks properly strong, but I think we're just caught out with some bad luck and bad strategy, especially Fernando Alonso finishing P17.
Yeah, Fernando, especially after he started 10th, but had he finished that Q3 lap, he probably would have been in the top 3.
Yeah.
It was going to be a very fast lap. And that kind of goes into my weekly hot take towards the end in our last segment. But they look, and if they can kind of iron out some of those wrinkles, I think Alpine will be a team that improves on what they did last year. And at the beginning during testing, they're like, oh, well, we're hoping for, 5th or whatever. But I'm like, they can probably very comfortably be 4th.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah. on a weekend that everything goes their way, there's no reason why Fernando can't pop it up onto the top 2 rows of the grid.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
My next one, the track layout changes combined with the 2022 regulations were great for cars being able to follow, but it still looks like, just by nature of that track, it's hard to overtake. And I know we already covered that at the beginning of the episode, but I think it just bears repeating, that we are continuously being proven that these new regulations are working. And it's really good to see.
Absolute W on that one. Yep. For sure.
Again, another thing that we already touched at the very beginning, but it bears repeating, and we're gonna repeat it again later. But it is so good for F1 to be back down under. My only thing, it was very refreshing. My only thing is, so I mean, for us, the race was at 2 a.m, which I on the East Coast of the US, it was at 2 a.m, which I went to bed at like 9-10 o'clock. I got up for the race, then went back to bed, and I got up at like 10 o'clock and pounded like 2 or 3 cups of coffee before my gig.
I didn't even do that. I just woke up and watched the replay on the F1 TV app.
Yeah. So I was so tired though watching the race. After I woke up, I watched the highlights just to make sure that I actually watched it, that it wasn't just a fever dream. But it was so funny. And I think also for us on the East Coast, races for us are always like, for us growing up, our life, our childhood, everything is you wake up, you have breakfast, you drink coffee, and you watch F1. That's just what you do. Friday, Saturday, Sunday, you get up, you watch F1 with breakfast. And that's just the way it is, with the exception of like night races or like Japan. The race for us is going to be at like 10 p.m. or something.
Or the North America or the Western Hemisphere races, like in Brazil, Mexico.
Yeah, like the North and South American races.
The 2 U.S. races in Canada.
Yeah, so for us, this is our lifestyle, and for what we experience, that is always the case with Aussies and Kiwis. You know, that's always their lifestyle. You know, watching F1 in the middle of the night, like that's just kind of the way it's done. So it was so funny to watch Europeans.
It kind of was
like, and I'm not trying to be like mean or aggressive about it. I'm not trying
to be
like,
or anything
or elitist and be like, welcome to our world. I'm just saying, I think it was kind of funny to watch.
But I don't want to say welcome to our world, but welcome to our world.
Yeah. But honestly, I saw a couple people saying like, I saw a couple tweets of like European F1 fans that were like, wait, we have so much time to do other things during the day. And honestly, that's what I love about Formula One is I can get up in the morning, I can watch it, and I can do other things during the day.
Yeah.
And like,
and also like waking up and having breakfast and your morning coffee and watching F1. Don't sleep on that, because it's actually like really nice.
It's really nice. It's like, it's great. It's awesome. So anyway, long tangent. It's good for F1 to be back in Australia. 3 more. The next one is the Leclerc Ferrari combination is truly, truly dominant, and it will be unbeatable if they can maintain this form with upgrades coming to the car throughout the season. Sainz has had a rough start to the season and has been hampered with a lot of bad luck. But if he can have some good weekends, especially coming up early in the season, the Constructors' Championship looks like it's Ferrari's to lose.
Yeah. And we'll talk about that in one of our next segments. But yeah, absolutely. Charles and Ferrari, what we are seeing is what they had been hoping for when they signed Charles in 2019.
Yes. Yep.
And he's doing what they expected him to do. So
yeah. And I'm doing this myself, and I would caution anybody that is already kind of jumping to the conclusion of like getting down on Carlos Sainz. He just had a lot of bad luck this weekend. And I would caution anybody of judging Carlos Sainz's form based on this race, because he was on the podium in Bahrain and in Saudi Arabia. So That's just my thing. Let's be cautious. I think Carlos and Charles have both said that their car is more suited to tracks like Imola, which is next, and it's Italian, and they're driving for Ferrari. So I think something with the next coming races like Imola, Spain, Azerbaijan, Monaco. I think those are going to be the critical races where we really start to evaluate not only Ferrari's form but everybody's form and really start to see like, okay, what is this championship really looking like? But if Ferrari maintains this form, which I've seen no signs of them slowing down, they will 100% be. It is their championship to lose. Two more. The pace of Haas seemingly disappeared this weekend, but Steiner says it's due to setups. And I think it's also due to a little bit circuit specificities. But yeah, it was really weird to see Haas just, their form kind of disappeared. Their pace disappeared. So I think they're going to need, I think it was good because they had a weekend where they couldn't really understand the setups. I think it's going to be good for them to, I think this weekend will have been good for them so that they can understand the car a little bit more going into the next couple races. And my last one, the Monegasque and Italian national anthem combo is a banger, and it is probably the best national anthem combo on the grid. You can't change my mind. I mean, the Italian national anthem is already a banger, but the Monegasque national anthem, I'm sitting there like it sounds like a proper march. It doesn't sound like a national anthem, especially the national anthem that we're used to.
Oh gosh.
But it sounds like a proper march. It's something that I, as a musician who has an affinity for the American Wind Ensemble, it is something that for me, I would absolutely love to play. I think that would be so much fun. Same thing with the Italian national anthem. And it is made better by how passionate the Ferrari mechanics and engineers are when they're underneath the podium and they're singing the Italian national anthem.
Chills every time.
So those are all of my race takeaways. So
with that,
move on.
Yeah, we'll go on to our next segment of our weekly top 10. Now, as a reminder for this segment, for our weekly top 10, it's not just the top 10 drivers. It's the top 10, literally anything. Anything goes. Top 10. There are no rules.
There are no rules.
There are no rules. So speaking of there are no rules, in 10th place, we have the track updates. Yeah. Track updates. They made the racing a lot better. And it's still street course.
Yep.
Don't get me wrong. But the updates improve the racing. That combined with the 2022 regulations of cars, phenomenal.
Yeah, for sure. I was initially worried about it. I know this is something that we haven't chatted about on the episode, but it definitely needs to be brought up. Coming into the weekend, there were 4 DRS zones, which there's normally two or three. That is the most that any F1 track has ever had. They initially got rid of the third of 4 DRS zones, which was between turn 5 and turn 9. What was turn 11, what is now turn 9. So they got rid of that DRS zone, which I think is very good. That so
it just seemed excessive.
It seemed excessive. I was really worried that going up to that 9-10 chicane, which is already precarious,
and very fast,
and very fast, having gotten rid of a chicane. They're already approaching that at really faster speeds than ever on top of a DRS zone. That was going to be rough. And I'm glad that they got rid of that DRS zone. But yeah, so the three DRS zones were great. That was exactly what the track needed. No more. And I think this is sparking a really interesting conversation around DRS and its place in Formula One, which I think Formula One, just as the way that the cars are designed and the way that the teams develop their cars throughout the course of a season, DRS is always going to be a necessity in my eyes, because it's always going to be a series that is going to be really hard to overtake. So yeah. I think DRS is always going to have a place in F1, but yeah, the track updates definitely did their job.
Yep, I agree. In ninth place, some of these could also go in with our meme of the week. The press conference shenanigans that we saw. Lots of jokes, lots of funny comments. I was during the times where they were doing all the press conferences again, I was probably far more busy than you were. So I didn't really see a lot of the clips. I also am no longer on Twitter. Account got hacked. And so I was like, you know what? Just gonna stay off Twitter. So you probably saw a lot more of the clips than I did.
Yep.
I saw a couple, but
yeah, I think, it was so many media shenanigans happening. Like, like somebody asked, like in the Ferrari fan meet and greet, somebody asked Charles what his beauty routine was. Like, how does he look so attractive? They were at the McLaren one, they were asking Daniel and Lando what their pre-race ritual is. And they were Daniel said, yeah, we have like a 10 to 15 second hug before every race. And then Lando was like, yeah, and every time my hand gets lower. They were in the Friday press conference before FP1, or they were talking about, they were asking Lewis and Max about the piercing thing that came up, which the race director put out some notes reminding drivers about piercings and chains and jewelry and everything, which to me came all across really malicious towards Lewis Hamilton. So that really rubbed me the wrong way. Like that's like, ooh,
because it was kind of, almost felt like they were pointing at Lewis without actually pointing at Lewis.
I saw those notes and I was like, who's the only driver that wears that amount of jewelry? That's not okay. But Lewis and Max were joking about it and like talking about like Lewis made a joke about Max having nipple rings, like all of these things. Like it was there was something in the water in Australia. It was so funny.
It's hilarious.
During Ted's notebook after the race, a fan took off his shoe, poured a Heineken in it, and gave it to Ted Kravitz
to do a shoey.
And he did it
like on live TV.
You could tell, and I think that is just purely because everybody, the fans, the drivers, team personnel, media personnel, everybody was so excited to be back in Australia, and it provided some truly entertaining moments.
Yeah. And our next in eighth place, kind of going along with meme of the week, the Marshall scooters.
Yeah, it started with Sebastian Vettel getting a €5,000 fine after, was it qualifying or FP3?
I think it was one of the practice sessions where
he
rode around the track just on one of the Marshall scooters.
Yeah.
And just like seeing that clip, I was like, that's the only thing I care about this weekend.
Yeah, and
like I don't care what happens in the race. I got to watch Sebastian Vettel drive the track on a scooter.
And there are so many good memes about him, like being MotoGP champion and and stuff like that. Memes. Those are brilliant. And then like it was like for the rest of the weekend, anytime the scooter came out, it was like a big deal. Mm-hmm. It was so funny. But I did want to chat briefly about that €5,000 fine. So what that was is it's like 10 or 15 minutes after a session concludes. No driver is allowed to be on track for any reason unless given specific permission by the marshals. And Sebastian Vettel crashed at the end of FP3, and they were recovering his car after they said that the session would not be resumed. Excuse me. So they were recovering his car, and I guess it took a long time, more than 10 or 15 minutes. And so he rode a scooter around the track because it was at like turn 3 or something. Or turn 5, and he rode around the rest of the lap on the scooter, and it broke the regulations. But I think that is €5,000 that Sebastian Vettel will cough up happily.
Yeah,
so
it made for some good entertainment.
Yep. Moving on to 7th place, we have Alex Albon.
Alex Albon, yeah, he started. He had some bad luck, got some, with the fuel irregularity, had to start at the back of the grid.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't really qualify well, but you know, he ran an amazing race, finished 10th place. Is going from last in a Williams of all cars, going from last to 10th, and finishing in the points. It was a great drive from Alex. It was a really,
Yeah.
really good drive.
And like I said before, his first points as a Williams driver, Williams's first points of the season, coming from all the way in the back. So he got disqualified for the same reason that Sebastian got disqualified at the end of the 2021 Hungarian Grand Prix, that his car could not produce the 1 liter of fuel necessary for post-race inspection by the FIA to make sure that they're running to the regulations. So couldn't make it happen, started from the back, made a very unconventional strategy work for him really, really well. And
strategy,
yeah,
we haven't seen that happen. Drivers going all the way to the end of the race since, like the early 2000s.
Yeah, I mean, it was very much Michael Schumacher at the Belgian Grand Prix, literally pitting on the last lap. Or no, it was either Belgium or Great Britain, literally to fulfill the tire requirement, pitted after having completed the last lap. So he won from the pit lane. So it was very much like that. And it's just great to see Alex Albon back in point scoring contention. I think that Williams team is not at a position where they can compete for points on outright pace. It is going to take a lot of weird things happening or a lot of unconventional things happening. And he capitalized and made it work for him.
Yeah. Get the points where you can.
Yep. Precisely.
Speaking of getting the points where you can, in 6th place, we have Mercedes. Yeah. They, we've said it a bunch, but they just look like they've been very off form the whole season so far. Granted, it's only been 3 races, but, seeing them finish 3rd and 4th in a car that really shouldn't be there
for the second 3 races.
Yes, for second of the first 3 races. That was a great drive from Mercedes. They're picking up points, and now they're capitalizing on Red Bull's misfortune, and now they're second in the title.
Yep.
Which at the beginning of the season, everyone was like, "This is Ferrari and Red Bull's year," completely discrediting Mercedes, discounting Mercedes. I don't think Mercedes is going to come close to Ferrari, but right now Mercedes in 2nd place. Great drive for them. Great strategy, making it work. And yeah, and hats off to George and Lewis on their pace.
And
really great weekend for them.
Yeah. The reason, I mean, we have to give credit where credit is due, and which is especially hard for us Ferrari fans. But Mercedes really did a really good job. I think the only reason why I couldn't place them higher is because I think on average they still have the 6th or 7th fastest car, or 5th or 6th fastest car. So they're still on average this weekend were on average slower than McLaren and Alpine. And they capitalized on a really great start for both drivers and misfortune at the hands of a lot of other people being out of position, like Carlos Sainz and Max Verstappen having to retire. So they capitalized when they needed to, but there's still a little ways. And I think George Russell and Lewis Hamilton will be the first to tell you that they still have a little ways to go. But yeah, have to give credit where credit is due. Mercedes did everything that they needed to this weekend.
Yep. And along the same vein, in 5th place, we placed McLaren. Yeah. McLaren, they started off arguably way worse than Mercedes did at the beginning of the season. And they also had a double points finish. I mean, was it Daniel Ricciardo who qualified 4th?
Lando Norris.
That's who it was. I knew it was one of them. Lando Norris qualified 4th. Really, really great pace all weekend long for McLaren. And they looked like to have a very, very solid weekend considering where they started in Bahrain.
Yeah, a couple things just continuing on that McLaren train. So the reason why we have them higher than Mercedes is considering where they started the season compared to Mercedes. So they had like this They were like second slowest in Bahrain. And this is their first double points finish as a team. And like we've always said, on a weekend that they needed that. The other thing is at one point, both of the McLarens, Lando leading the way, followed by Daniel Ricciardo, were catching George Russell and Lando Norris tried to make a couple passes on George Russell. This before the Mercedes flip-flopped around because of Sebastian Vettel's the safety car that came out because of Sebastian Vettel. But before that was happening, Lewis Hamilton was the leading of the two Mercedes, and the McLarens were like on the tail of George Russell and were hunting him down. They looked they just that McLaren looked more sorted out than they had at any point during the season. So that was really, really good to see for them. And I think that circuit too is a layout that really suited them and the car a lot.
Yep. Now on to fourth place, we have Mr. Sergio Perez. He finished second. He definitely was there to pick up the pieces of Max's retirement, and that's what you need in a teammate. And that's why you would see Mercedes dominate for so long, is because whenever like Valtteri made a mistake, Lewis was there, or whenever Lewis made a mistake, Valtteri was there. And that's what we saw with Sebastian and Mark Webber at Red Bull. Whenever Sebastian made a mistake, Mark was there to pick up the pieces. And whenever Mark made a mistake, Sebastian was there. And so with Sergio Perez getting second, great drive from him. Picked up the pieces.
Yeah, the only thing that he could have done better is if he had won the race, but just on pure pace alone, the Red Bulls were never, I mean, Max Verstappen even too was never going to catch Charles or Ferrari over the course of the weekend. So I mean, he did everything that he needed to do. Another podium and for Checo, another reason why he warranted getting re-signed and that he is the driver that they need right now. I think the whole Checo contract conversation is definitely a conversation for another podcast episode later in the season, but he did everything that he needed to do.
Yeah. On to the podium places. In third place, we have George Russell. Mr. George Russell in third place, getting his first ever podium for Mercedes. What a race for George. What a race.
Yeah, I think he said it himself. He said something like in his post-race interview with Mark Webber. Mark was talking to him about how he drove a good race, and he was a little sheepish and just kind of said, yeah, well, we capitalized on a couple good luck things, but he followed that up by saying something to the effect of, the best teams and the best drivers are there to capitalize on the misfortune of others. And that's exactly what he did. He pitted at the right time. The cards just kind of fell his way to put himself in what was originally second place before being overtaken by Sergio Perez. He pipped Hamilton because of the pit stops. And it was his first podium at Mercedes, especially considering the last time he was a podium threat for Mercedes was on his debut, and it was taken away from him. So that to me, it kind of read a little bit of redemption day for George Russell.
Yeah, absolutely. So it was great to see him up there. Great to see him on the podium. I was very happy. I love George. He's a cinnamon roll of a human being. Yeah.
I mean, I feel like we say this every episode. I feel like we need to make a new segment of our podcast where it's just like George Russell hype train.
We love George Russell.
We love George Russell here at the podcast. We love Alex Albon here at the podcast. It's great. Super, super happy for him.
Now, going on into second place on the podium, we have Mr. Charles Leclerc.
Yep.
So second place.
we'll get to why he's not number one when we get to number one. And this is
you'll
not,
understand why.
and this is, I mean, he had literally a perfect weekend. He was fastest in every session.
Yep.
He put it on pole. He grand slammed the race, which for those of you that are new to Formula One, don't know what a grand slam is. You have to start the race on pole. You have to lead every lap. You have to win, and you have to get the fastest lap. To give you an idea of how hard that is, Lewis Hamilton has won 103 Grand Prix throughout his career. And Lewis Hamilton has just 6 Grand Slams. Just 6.
Yep.
Out of 103 races. And his first Grand Slam. Oh, another thing to tell you it's so rare. It was the first Grand Slam for Ferrari since Fernando Alonso in 2010. Mm-hmm. But what is crazy to me is it was a Grand Slam on just his 4th win.
Yeah.
His 4th win. And every single win that he has won from pole.
Yeah.
Every single W that he's had has come from starting in pole position. So it was a truly dominant performance from Charles Leclerc. It could not have been better for him. The only thing that it could have been better for him if his teammate was right behind him.
Yeah. Or he had gone fastest in Q1 and Q2, which he didn't, but you know, that doesn't really matter.
So it was everything. He nearly had a perfect weekend.
Yeah.
And
pretty much did.
We've said it before and we'll say it again. He's doing everything the Ferrari needs him to do. He is the driver that Ferrari needs and that Ferrari contracted in 2019.
Yep. He's definitely looking like the championship favorite. Now, first place.
Well, before we move on, speaking of championship favorites, he's a 34-point lead over ye old George Russell. So it is him and George Russell leading the way.
The young kids are taking over.
Yeah, for real. And so he is leading the championship by 34 points. And that's a big deal because that is a bigger margin than the championship lead was at any point during 2021 between Lewis and Max.
Yep, by 1 point.
And it is 3 races.
Yep. Yeah, it's looking like Charles' year. Anyway, onto in first place, hoisting the trophy, spraying the champagne.
The only thing that can take Charles Leclerc off of the number 1 spot
is overall the entirety of the Australian Grand Prix. The whole weekend.
Yes.
That's in first place.
So,
and in a way, we are also winners because we got to witness such an awesome weekend.
Yes. And the other, it really, first of all, it was the highest attended sporting event in Melbourne history for anything. I think Australian history. Over the course of the weekend, there were 420,000 people there, which is more people than the 2021 US Grand Prix.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a hugely attended, popular event. It was insane. And it looks like y'all Australians, y'all know how to throw a freaking party. And the Australian Grand Prix has now become one of my top life bucket list items to cross off. I want to go to that race so bad. It looked like so much fun.
Oh my gosh, it looks like so much fun.
Also, and that was the exact race in the exact weekend that Melbourne and Australia needed because of the way that the last race ended, which if you all don't remember, cast your minds back to March 2020 when the race was canceled mere hours before running in FP1 when a McLaren mechanic and a fan both tested positive for COVID-19 and the race was shut down and then the world ended. So that was the exact race that Australia needed. Welcome back to the calendar, Melbourne. We missed you. We love you. Welcome back.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my gosh. It was, and you're absolutely right. We definitely should attend the Australian Formula One race at some point in our lives.
Yes.
That in Monza.
Oh my gosh.
But we'll go on to our next segment, and we're gonna make these quick because we are running short on time. Biggest winners and biggest losers of the weekend. We're gonna start off with our biggest losers, and then we'll go on to our biggest winners. So biggest losers, I have the Haas F1 team, Aston Martin, Fernando Alonso, unfortunately, and then the two DNFs of Max Verstappen and Carlos Sainz. Those are my biggest losers.
Yeah, I mean, you covered pretty much everything. Aston Martin had a pretty torrid weekend. Haas was,
oh gosh, yeah.
especially Sebastian Vettel. Haas had a lot of pace from that car that disappeared. Fernando Alonso got the short end of the stick with strategy. Yeah, all in all, and Max Verstappen, that was a weekend where he needed to finish P2. And
and I would say Carlos is an even bigger loser than say Max, because Max, he's got that huge deal, $50 million, 20 until 2025 or something. But Carlos is in the throes of contract renegotiation. He's trying to get his contract extended with Ferrari. And having a weekend like that, it's just like, ooh, yikes. I do want to mention, I don't think that'll look too terribly bad because he just had bad luck all around. So I don't think that'll play too much into Ferrari's decision of re-signing him.
Yes.
Because from what I've heard, the rumor that they're pretty much going to re-sign him. I think they're just waiting on the right time to make the announcement.
Yep. I think, and from what I understand, they're waiting until his home Grand Prix at the Spanish Grand Prix to announce it.
Oh, what a great weekend to announce it. But yeah, it's tough. And we'll talk about Haas a little bit more in our hot takes, because I know Chris has a very, very incredibly spicy hot take on that. So do you want to go on to our biggest winners of the weekend? Obviously, one of the biggest winners I have the weekend is Charles.
Yep.
I mean, he is the winner. Chris pretty much covered it. I mean, had basically a perfect weekend. Won the race, his first career Grand Slam. It could not have been it could not have been a better weekend for Charles.
Yep. I think other big winners, McLaren, Mercedes, we've already covered them a little bit. Yeah. I'm going to throw in Esteban Ocon because he finished P7, which is where I think he could have, and where I think about Fernando should have been. So it was good for him. Pierre Gasly, I'm going to throw in the winners category because he is shown to be, other than he was running in the points when his engine let go in Bahrain. He scored points in Saudi Arabia, and now he's scoring points again. He is continuing to be the consistent Pierre Gasly that we know him to be, the reliable Pierre Gasly that we know him to be, and that I think is going to create a big old headache for Helmut Marko and Christian Horner when it comes to contract renewals in probably about 4 or 5 months.
Yep.
So
I would also like to throw Checo into the pile too.
Yep.
I mean, we've already covered that in the weekly top 10, but finishing second, picking up the pieces from Max's DNF, but had a great weekend for Checo.
And the only other winner that I would say is Australia.
Yeah, the country of Australia. On to the most tasty segment. We've got our hot takes of the week. I want to go first because Chris, you've got some absolute bombshells of hot takes. Mine's kind of like lukewarm bathwater take. But I'll start off by saying I think Fernando Alonso is probably the best driver on the grid
at the moment.
That's my hot take. Because we saw this weekend, until things went horribly wrong in his Q3 lap, made it into Q3, he was about to put it on the front row. Like if you're looking at those sector times and breaking it down compared to where he was about to put that car in the front row. So when the Alpine is lined up really, really good, Fernando Alonso is easily one of the best drivers on the grid. Yeah, in my opinion. Plan is working.
I think he is going to be kind of tagging along with that. I think he is going to be the first non-Ferrari Red Bull winner of the season.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think Alpine also kind of going along with that. I think Alpine is comfortably looking like they're going to be fourth in the constructors as well.
Yeah. Cool. All right. So
Your turn.
I forgot what one was, but the other one was going to be, I feel like you have hyped me up, and I hyped me up entirely too much. I don't want to leave anybody disappointed. Oh, I remember what I was going to say. Please debate us. We love having conversations with people about Formula One. If you agree or disagree with any of these, let us know.
Yes,
My
please.
hot takes. I'm so excited. First one, Latifi and Stroll are both crashing entirely too much this season to warrant either of them being retained next year, especially Lance Stroll, who this weekend was just downright dangerous. Now, I want to talk about Latifi first. He crashed in Bahrain. He crashed in qualifying in Saudi Arabia and the race in Saudi Arabia. And I think his qualifying crash with Lance Stroll was that was purely bad luck. And that leads us to Lance Stroll. So a couple times this season already, Lance Stroll has gotten himself in trouble. So the crash between him and Nicholas Latifi in qualifying was Nicholas Latifi was letting a bunch of cars through because he was on a slow lap. One of them was Lance Stroll. Lance Stroll was also on a slow lap. And so Latifi was like, okay, I need to get the tires warmed up now because I'm about to start a hot lap. And so he went to go overtake Lance Stroll, and he went to overtake on the right. Lance Stroll, I guess, didn't look in his mirrors and just completely turned into Nicholas Latifi and ruined both of their race cars. Mm-hmm. And the reason why that's such a big deal, especially this year, is because we're in a budget cap era. That is going to be a big bill to repair both of those cars. And that's going to hurt those teams later on down the road in the season.
Yeah.
They only have $140 million.
Yep. And that was 100%
Lance Stroll's fault. And then during the race, he was racing Pierre Gasly and just completely turned in under braking to go defensive. And he got a 5-second time penalty. Just driving, there were some moments this weekend that made me go like, good freaking Lord, that is dangerous. And I think somebody, especially with Lance Stroll and with Nicholas Latifi, but somebody at that Aston Martin team has to have a conversation, or not even Aston Martin, somebody has to have a conversation with Lance Stroll, because his dad is not going to say anything, because as long as dad is in the team, he will retain his seat, which is truly unfortunate, because I was appalled by the way that Lance Stroll was driving this weekend, and Nicholas Latifi has got to stop crashing. So that's hot take number one.
Yeah.
Got that out of my system. Hot take number two, Red Bull needs to solve their reliability issues for their power unit, or Max Verstappen and Red Bull will be nowhere near the title this year. Max Verstappen will be unable to defend his title, and Red Bull will be nowhere near the constructors title. Mercedes is second in the constructors championship, and they're the fifth fastest car. Like, that is how bad Red Bull's situation is right now. And they need to take a good hard look at themselves and their engine and their power unit.
Yeah. Now we have seen Red Bull pull miracles, because I mean, the start of the 2012 season, if you remember, was horrible for Red Bull as well. You know, reliability issues, retiring, crashing. And then they pulled around and won. But yeah, you're absolutely right. If they want, if Max wants to seriously defend his title, they've got to solve it. And like now, they have to have it solved.
And anybody boo-hooing about Max Verstappen, especially Lewis fans boo-hooing about Max Verstappen, the race that he finished, the one race that he finished so far this season, he won. So Max is clearly good enough to win these races and to be a title contender. It is Red Bull, specifically Red Bull powertrains, that is letting him down.
Yep. You're absolutely right.
Okay. my last hot take. I'm passionate about this as a loyal Tifosi. Hating on Leclerc, calling him underrated or overrated, and Ferrari was just a trendy drive to survive hip thing to do, considering the form of Ferrari and the one episode that Ferrari got on Drive to Survive in season 2. It's been a hip and trendy thing over the past 2 years, and there are so many outspoken people that are awfully quiet right now, and I can't state enough how satisfying that is. Like, Ferrari have shut up so many people, and that to me is incredibly satisfying, because we as Tifosi know what Ferrari is, what Ferrari means. And we're just the Americans. I can't even imagine what that is for Italians. Short sidebar, I work for an Italian restaurant, and the owner is from Italy. And so he is one of the biggest tifosis that you can imagine. And every day we come in and we talk about F1. And it is so cool to watch him watch the resurgence of Ferrari. And it makes me happy. And it is just so satisfying to silence all of those people that were hating on Ferrari. Especially their power unit is just on fire.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go for it.
And I also want to say, and I don't want to, I know I may come across as like gatekeeping. I'm not gatekeeping. I hate gatekeepers, because everyone should enjoy what they enjoy. But a lot of the hate and criticism for Ferrari, especially from the American circle, who only know of Ferrari's success from Drive to Survive. And they know of Michael Schumacher, and know that he won 7 titles, whatever. But like, people who got into Formula One after Drive to Survive are very surprised at Ferrari being successful this year, like almost like they don't believe it. And it's like, us as Ferrari fans who grew up watching Ferrari in their era of dominance, we're not that surprised.
No,
like we were patiently waiting.
Nope.
We knew it was from starting at the beginning of 2020. We knew it was going to be a multi-year process to kind of get that back. And look, here we are. But there are a lot of people who are like, what? Ferrari's good? It's like, they have more world championships than any other team.
Ferrari has more world championships as a constructor than Mercedes has seasons in F1.
Yeah.
So us Tifosi, we're not surprised. But I will say, and that's kind of the beautiful thing about Drive to Survive too, though. And I don't want to fault those fans that are just kind of like boohooing on Ferrari because of Drive to Survive. I think Drive to Survive did Ferrari dirty. And this leads into part B of this hot take, is with how spectacularly Mercedes, McLaren, and Aston Martin have imploded at the beginning of the season. If there is not some sort of episode like, we need to talk about Ferrari in the upcoming season of Drive to Survive, I'm going to be a little hard done by, because Drive to Survive did Ferrari so dirty.
Oh, gosh, so dirty. And like, especially in the 2022 season, like the 3rd season of Drive to Survive, like, oh my God, they made themselves look bad.
Yeah.
It's just like, oh God.
Criticism, for sure, worth it. Not to that extent.
Yeah.
I think there was and this is things that most Ferrari fans, most Tifosi, were already aware of. Problems, friction between Charles and Seb, friction between Seb and Ferrari, all of these different dynamics at play. Like, we already kind of knew that a big restructuring was about to take place, and it has happened, and Ferrari's back up front, and the only people surprised are not Ferrari fans.
Yep. Yeah.
So that's it for our Australian Grand Prix review.
Yes, it was a great weekend. And now I think we have 2 weeks off until Imola?
Yes, our next race, it will be in Imola. I'm looking it up now because I
It's
don't
like
have
end of April, I think.
I do not have the schedule in front of me. I'm looking it up now. So
Well, while
pause.
Chris looks that up, last thing we'll say, be sure to please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Spotify, follow us on Spotify, all of our social medias as well. Trying to really, really push out content to get as many followers as possible. Share with your friends, leave a like, leave a comment. And as always, our podcasts are not only just to talk, but for discussion outside of this. So please leave a comment, debate us. We want to hear maybe viewpoints that we haven't thought of, or hear some other things from outside of Chris and I's little bubble of Formula One. So please leave us a comment, debate us. We want the smoke. So
yeah. Next race is April 24th at the Formula One Rolex Grand Prix Primero del Made in Italy e Emilia Romagna 2022. That is a huge mouthful. It's at Imola in 2 weeks.
Imola. Yep. It's
So,
Emily.
see you then.
Imola, not
Imola.
Emily. All right. We'll see you then.
We will see you then. Bye.